For 3 years after the accident, I became the kind of person who could describe a city without ever mentioning its highways. I knew which grocery store was 10 minutes farther, but avoided the overpass. I knew which pharmacy had easier side street parking. I knew how to add 35 minutes to any trip, so I would not have to merge at speed, pass a semi, or feel the air change when a bridge lifted above the water. I became very skilled at disguising fear as preference. I told people I liked scenic routes. I told them surface streets helped me clear my head. I told them traffic on the freeway was obnoxious anyway. What I did not tell them was that the accident had left a permanent theater inside my body. One hard brake light ahead of me, and the whole thing replayed. The impact, the helpless spin, the impossible certainty that I was about to become one of those people strangers slowed down to stare at. I survived. That is the uncomplicated version. The truer version is that part of me survived on paper long before it returned to my nerves. I went back to work. I paid bills. I answered texts with cheerful punctuation. I stood in checkout lines and remembered to buy dish soap. But if you asked my body whether I was safe inside a moving vehicle, it would have laughed in your face. So when people say recovery is not linear, I always think that sentence is too elegant for what it actually feels like. Recovery felt stupid. It felt repetitive. It felt like sitting in my parked car with both hands on the steering wheel while my heartbeat tried to convince me that idling in daylight was a mortal threat. It felt like driving one exit and getting off. Then 2 exits. Then getting on a bridge and talking out loud to myself the entire way, like a woman trying to coax a frightened dog across a wooden dock. Last month, for the first time since the accident, I drove across the North Bridge by myself. It was not even a dramatic bridge. No famous skyline. No cinematic fog. Just steel railings, slate water, and the ordinary indignity of regional infrastructure. But to me, it felt biblical. When I reached the other side, I sat in a pharmacy parking lot with my palms stinging from how hard I had gripped the wheel. Then I laughed. Then I cried. Then I bought gum and windshield wipes I did not need, because I wanted proof I had crossed over and returned as a person who could do errands afterward. That was 6 days before Eli took my keys. Eli and I had been together a little over a year. If you had met him early, you would have thought he was exactly the kind of man a recovering, anxious person would be lucky to find. He remembered practical things. He kept granola bars in the glove box. He texted when I got home just to say, "Made it." He had a patient voice, the kind men use when they want their calm to count as character. When I admitted how hard driving still was for me, he did not mock me. He offered to ride along on practice runs. He looked at me with such focused sympathy that I mistook being carefully handled for being deeply loved. I understand now that there are people who enjoy being needed in ways that look, from the outside, like generosity. At first, it can even feel like relief. Someone offers to drive at night. Someone says, "It's okay, I'll take care of that." Someone remembers the routes you avoid and starts shaping life around your fear so smoothly that you forget to ask whether accommodation is slowly becoming architecture. By spring, I was driving more. Not perfectly, not heroically, but enough that my world had begun expanding again. I drove to work twice a week instead of once. I volunteered to pick up my aunt from the train station. I crossed 2 bridges in one day and treated myself to a coffee afterward like I had won a private contest no one else knew I was in. Every time I did something new, Eli praised me in a way that always lingered just a second too long. "You did great," he would say, then add, "See? You just need someone with you." Or, "I knew you could do it, babe." Good thing I came. It was subtle enough that I did not argue. I was too busy being grateful for progress to examine who he was quietly appointing as the manager of it. The night everything shifted, I had planned something embarrassingly specific. I was going to drive the loop across the Marina Bridge, up through the toll road, and back through the tunnel before dark fully settled in. Not because anyone else would call that an achievement, but because the route had all my remaining trouble spots stacked together. Elevation, merging, water on both sides, and that brief stomach-drop feeling that still hit me whenever concrete barriers replaced a real shoulder. I had showered early. I had made a playlist for it. I had even put on the silver ring my grandmother used to twist when she was nervous, because touching it reminded me that courage does not have to look graceful to count. Eli said he would come with me. I said okay. Not because I needed him there, though maybe part of me still liked the idea of a witness. Recovery can be lonely. Sometimes you want someone in the passenger seat, just to confirm that the miracle was visible from another angle. We lived in a rental at the edge of a narrow lane, where the houses had automatic gates mostly for vanity, not security. The gate at our place was painted matte black, which looked sleek in daylight and became nearly invisible after sunset. It was also slower than it used to be. You pressed the keypad, waited for the motor to groan awake, and then prayed the thing had decided to cooperate with modern life. I punched in the code. The gate began sliding open. I put the car in reverse. I was paying attention. That matters to me. I was not distracted, drunk, or rushing. I checked the rear camera, checked my mirrors, and eased back exactly the way cautious people do after years of teaching their bodies not to panic. Then I heard the scrape. Not a crash. Not shattered glass. Just that sick metallic drag that makes every driver immediately sit up straighter with their whole soul. I braked, looked back. The gate had clipped the rear corner because it had started drifting closed faster than usual, and in the bad lighting I had misjudged where the edge was. I got out. So did Eli. The damage was laughably small. A smear on the paint. A new line on the gate that joined several older lines, as if the thing had been collecting bad decisions long before mine. I exhaled so hard it almost became a laugh. Okay, I said. Annoying, but okay. Let me pull out and then I'll circle back after the drive. I was already reaching for the driver's door when Eli said no. It was such a flat word that I turned around, thinking I must have misheard him. He held out his hand. Give me the keys. I thought he meant he wanted to move the car while I looked at the gate. Why? Because you're done driving tonight. He said it the way people announce weather. Not emotional, not loud, just final. I stared at him. I'm fine. I misjudged the gate. That's all. Exactly, he said. You misjudged it. You're too worked up now. Hand me the keys. There are moments in a relationship when the room changes shape around one sentence. This was one of them. Because what hit me first was not anger. It was embarrassment. The deep, hot humiliation of being spoken to as if I were a teenager who had borrowed the family car and proved unfit to continue. I laughed once, mostly out of disbelief. Eli, stop. Instead of stopping, he stepped closer. I'm serious. You're not driving on the bridge after that. I remember exactly where the keys were, looped around my finger beside the tiny brass lighthouse charm my brother had given me when I finally renewed my license photo without crying. I closed my hand around them. It's my car. And I'm trying to keep you safe, he said. That sentence might have worked on me 6 months earlier. It might even have sounded loving. But something about the timing stripped it bare. Keep me safe from what? A shallow scrape in my own driveway? A bruised ego? The fact that I still intended to do the hard thing after making a mistake? I shook my head. Move. I'm going. What happened next lasted maybe 2 seconds. Long enough to understand. Short enough that if I told it badly, someone might call it nothing. He took the keys out of my hand. Not with theatrical force. Not in some movie-wild lunge. Just quickly, confidently, with the ease of a person who believed he had the right. Then he stepped back. It is terrifying when a relationship reveals itself through something almost neat. No yelling. No broken furniture. No dramatic villain face. Just your own keys disappearing into someone else's fist. Give them back, I said. He did not. You can be mad later, he said. Tonight, you're not driving. I wish I could tell you I became instantly eloquent, that I delivered a clean speech about autonomy and boundaries and the politics of paternal concern. What I actually said was, "Are you out of your mind?" His jaw tightened. "Lower your voice." It is amazing how fast some men reach for tone when power starts slipping. I took a step toward him. "You do not get to decide this for me. Someone has to," he said. There it was. Not concern, not partnership, governance. I felt a jolt of cold clarity so strong it was almost calming. Because suddenly, the last year rearranged itself behind him, like scenery being pulled into focus. The extra offers to drive. The way he praised my progress while positioning himself at the center of it. The small comments when I went somewhere alone. The subtle relief in his voice whenever I said, "Actually, can you come with me?" I had mistaken availability for devotion. But dependence is flattering to some people. They call it closeness because that sounds nicer than admitting they feel most secure when your world narrows around them. "Give me my keys," I said again. He pointed toward the house. "Inside. We can talk when you're calm." That did something irreversible to me, not because he pointed, because of the word calm. Women know that word. We know how often it really means compliant. We know how often it gets used after a man creates the very emergency he now plans to supervise. "No," I said. "We're talking right here. And then I'm leaving." He moved between me and the open driver's door. He did not shove me. He did not need to. He simply planted himself there and held the keys at his side like a confiscated privilege. I looked past him at the dark road beyond the gate and had the strangest thought. If I let him win this one moment, the accident would no longer be the worst thing that had happened to my driving life. He would be. That thought was so clean it cut through everything. Fear, shock, love, habit, all of it. I said, very quietly, "If you don't hand those back right now, we're done." People talk about ultimatums as if they are manipulative by definition. Sometimes they are simply the sound a boundary makes when it has reached the edge of speech. He studied my face, waiting for softness, then for tears, then maybe for common sense, by which I mean surrender. When none of those arrived, he tried a different tactic. "You're acting like I attacked you," he said. "I watched you hit a gate and almost panic. I'm being the rational one." I had not panicked. That was the cruelty of it. I had been proud of myself for not panicking, for pausing, assessing, and still wanting to continue. He was not protecting me from collapse. He was rewriting competence into instability because that made his theft sound noble. "I didn't almost panic," I said. "I made a minor mistake. Adults do that and continue their evening." He laughed under his breath. "Not adults who should be driving over water tonight." That might have scared me once. Instead, it made me furious, because I realized he was not only taking my keys, he was reaching back into my old fear and trying to appoint himself its spokesman. I held out my hand. "Last chance." He looked at me for a long second, then said the sentence that finished the relationship. "You're not ready to be this independent if one little setback throws you off." I wish I could preserve for you the exact silence that followed. The almost holy silence of hearing the truest thing a person has said to you by accident. Not ready to be this independent. As if independence were a dosage he administered. As if readiness were his to certify. As if my recovery had become, somewhere along the way, a lease he thought he co-signed. I stopped trying to sound reasonable. "Get out of my way." "Not until you calm down." Again with calm. Again with the implication that my objection to being controlled was evidence that control was necessary. I stepped around him and walked straight to the side gate that opened onto the front path. He caught my wrist for a second, more reflex than force, but enough to make every muscle in my body go rigid. "Mara," he said, suddenly softer. "I'm worried about you." I pulled free. "No," I said. "You're worried about me not needing you." His expression changed. Not guilt, recognition. The ugly flash people get when you have found the wire behind the wall and named what it powers. I went inside, took my overnight bag from the closet, shoved in jeans, a charger, medication, and the folder where I kept all my insurance papers, because trauma teaches you to travel as if bureaucracy may ambush you anywhere. He followed me from room to room, talking the whole time in that careful tone people use when they want to sound measured enough to win later. "You're blowing this up. I was scared for you. Anyone would have done the same. You're making me the bad guy for caring." It is astonishing how quickly concern curdles once it stops working. By the time I zipped the bag, his voice had sharpened around the edges. "You are not driving anywhere tonight," he said. I turned and looked at him. Truly looked. At the man in my kitchen, holding the keys to a car he did not own, explaining my own limits back to me as if I were an unreliable narrator in my own life. And I saw, with a clarity that still embarrasses me for being late, that this had never been one bad moment in a good relationship. This was the first undeniable moment in a relationship built on a quieter imbalance I had been too grateful to name. There are people who meet your wound and help you guard it while it closes. There are others who build a throne beside it. I called my friend Lena, not because I needed permission, but because every woman deserves one witness who can hear the shape of danger while you are still trying not to exaggerate it. When she answered, I said, "Can you come get me?" She did not ask 12 questions. She said, "I'm on my way." While we waited, Eli tried one final version of the story. He put my keys on the counter between us and said, with performative weariness, "If you want to end us over one responsible decision, that's on you. One responsible decision." That was his edit. The same way some people say argument when they mean humiliation, or misunderstanding when they mean betrayal. I picked up the keys. The metal was warm from his hand. That detail disgusted me more than it should have. "No," I said. "I'm ending this because you experienced one mistake and immediately decided authority belonged to you." He opened his mouth. I didn't let him speak. "Do you know what the worst part is?" I asked. "It isn't that you took them. It's that you expected me to accept it. You thought I would stand here and let you rename control as love. For the first time all night, he had nothing ready." Lena texted that she was outside. I slung my bag over my shoulder and walked out without hurrying. That mattered to me. I did not want my leaving to feel like escape, even if some part of it was. I wanted it to feel like choosing a direction. I stayed with Lena for 3 nights. On the second morning, before work, I asked if she would sit in the passenger seat while I did the marina loop. She looked at me over her coffee and said, "Only if you want company, not because you need supervision." I nearly cried right there at the kitchen table, not because the words were especially poetic, because they were precise. Because real care does not quietly audition for custody. We did the route at noon, under a pale sky that made the water look folded from tin. My hands shook on the first incline. By the toll plaza, I could feel my throat tightening. And when we reached the middle of the bridge, where the city pulled apart behind me and the next shore had not fully arrived yet, I heard Eli's voice in my head. "You're not ready to be this independent." I kept driving. The strange thing about reclaiming yourself is that it is rarely cinematic. No swelling music. No one in another car clapping. Just lane markers, breath, sunlight on the hood, and the private decision to keep going. When I reached the other side, Lena grinned and asked if I wanted to pull over. I said no. I wanted to finish the whole loop. I wanted the bridge, and the tunnel, and the long curve home. I wanted my nervous system to learn a new ending while it was paying attention. So I drove. Past the marina, past the eucalyptus stand, through the tunnel where sound changes for half a second and your chest remembers old alarms, over the second bridge with the broken yellow line flickering under us like a sewing needle, repairing something invisible. By the time we got back to Lena's apartment, I was exhausted in the satisfying way people are after honest effort. Not supervised, not corrected, not managed, just tired from using muscles I wanted back. I ended things with Eli by phone that evening. I knew better than to stage a grand in-person conclusion just so he could workshop remorse in real time. He cycled through disbelief, apology, insult, then injury, with almost professional efficiency. He told me he had only cared too much. He said I was punishing him for loving me. He said most boyfriends would have done the same. He said I was proving I wasn't stable enough for a serious relationship. That last part almost made me laugh. Not because it was absurd, because it was familiar now. The oldest trick in the world. When a woman refuses containment, diagnose the refusal. I moved out by the end of the week. Not back to my old life exactly. Recovery does not hand you your old self in original packaging. It gives you someone more deliberate, sometimes lonelier, but harder to trick. The gate left a thin scar on the rear corner of my car. I kept meaning to buff it out. Then one day I realized I did not want to. It had stopped looking like damage. It looked like a witness. Sometimes, even now, I run my thumb over the lighthouse charm before I start the engine. I still have days when bridges feel taller than they are. I still check maps more than most people. I still occasionally take surface streets when my body is tired, and my courage has spent itself elsewhere. But no one takes my keys. No one stands in a doorway and calls it care. No one gets to tell me whether a small mistake revokes my adulthood. The accident taught me fear can colonize a life if you let it. Eli taught me something almost harder. There are people who will volunteer to administer that colony for you, then call themselves devoted when they profit from your smaller map. What saved me was not becoming fearless. It was realizing that love and permission are not the same language. A person who loves you can be worried. A person who loves you can disagree. A person who loves you can ask you to slow down, talk tomorrow, reconsider the route, rest for the night. But the moment they close their fist around your freedom and tell you it is for your own good, you are no longer having an argument. You are being informed of the size they prefer you to remain. I crossed the bridge again last Sunday at dusk, windows cracked, music up, sky turning copper over the water. No passenger seat witness this time, no one narrating my progress back to me. At the midpoint, where the rails are low enough to make the whole bay feel exposed and possible at once, I realized I was smiling. Not because the fear was gone forever. Not because healing had become easy. Because I was driving toward my own life, and this time, no one was holding the keys.
Thank you for watching. If this story pulled you in, do me one favor. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you the moment it drops. Remember, nothing is ever just what it seems. See you on the next one.